Okay, so I'm now being joined by Charlie Angus. Charlie, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, you're calling this the Resistance and Resiliency Tour. Um, I'm curious, just to start things off, how would you define those two terms when we're talking about resiliency and resistance? What do you think those two words mean in this instance?
I came up when Trump was elected and shocked like everyone else, and knowing we were going into a very dark time. Just how dark it was going to be, nobody had any idea. But I felt then that this was no longer politics as normal, and we had to pretend, and we had to stop pretending. So that meant it was about resistance. We have to resist the rise of tyranny, the rise of fascism. We have to resist the hate that is being spread all through us. And the one thing I've learned very quickly in the work I've been doing is I don't think we count on our political leaders to save us. This is really a moment that's coming from the grassroots. So we have to become resilient. We have to start building links with each other. We have to get out. We have to start meeting people. Um, to save democracy, to save the planet at this point is really going to come, I think, from the bottom up. And we can't necessarily count on our leaders. So we have to be more resilient and we have to get over our fear and realize that when we're together, we have an enormous amount of strength.
hmm I want to throw a couple of your own pull quotes at you. One is you said you're going full out now, and another one I think was from the National Observer. You said I'm shedding my snake skin, and just to tag into what you were kind of saying there, it feels like you were kind of bound by your role as a member of parliament in terms of like how active you can be. And I'm curious if you can just like maybe explain why that is. Why do you feel like you can do more from the outside now when this is such a pivotal moment as opposed to what I think you were a role you were quite successful at, which was being a member of parliament?
Well, I've spent 21 years in Parliament, but and I'd made the decision to leave because just the practicality of them making my riding, which is already bigger than the United Kingdom, much bigger. They somehow feel that Northern Ontario and our isolated rural Indigenous communities are somehow overrepresented democratically, which is just absolute BS. But if I'd taken on a riding that was that massive, I wouldn't be doing anything else except driving in my car and going to coffee shops and Legion halls, which is all important. I got to do politics again from the grassroots, and I realized I wouldn't be able to do what I felt needed to be done by doing that. And I made that decision, and then the Trump thing hit. And the one thing I really began to see is that within the structures that we have politically, we tend to stick to what is the safe, to what we know. We tend to rely on our comms teams, our
Mm,
policy people who know what they know, but we are in completely uncharted territory. We don't know what we know about dealing with the rise of fascism. We are in a period like the 1930s. So I suddenly felt very freed up to be able to say things that I felt needed to be said. I'd started out in the grassroots. I was running blockades long before I ever got bought a suit. And I feel at this time I'm I'm right. I suddenly found myself in a moment where maybe I could bring the skills that I brought to bear as a politician, as someone who knows policy, but also someone who knows how to bring people together through grassroots organizing. So, and it has just taken off. So yes, I'm going full out.
You're getting at something though, which I think is that like governments, political parties, establishment, like people who are well established are kind of risk averse. And I think we kind of see that in the United States. We certainly saw that in the last election. If you're too safe and you don't take risks, there is kind of a blowback on that because I think people are willing to accept a little bit of risk if it means changing things. So in terms of like a bottom up effort, now having sort of been at both ends of this, how do we rebuild a system that is less risk averse or is more accepting of risk, especially after this last election where I think by and large people were trying to make safe choices?
Well, I think what happened in the last election was interesting. I mean, the liberals were on death's door. Every liberal I knew was retiring and saying they were going off to be with family because they didn't want to get trashed in the election. We were sleepwalking, I think, to a political disaster. We were sleepwalking to a MAGA future with Pierre Poilievre. We'd come out of COVID. There had been just sort of this relentless banging of the drum that Canada's broken. The conspiracy haters were everywhere. You didn't want to talk politics because your neighbor or your cousin or your the person you worked with was going to start throwing raging conspiracy stuff at you. So we all were in our shells. And then Trump got elected and we suddenly woke up and it put
Mm,
us into new uncharted territory. I think what happened in the federal election, watching Pierre Poilievre lose a 25-point lead in the course of 2 months is unprecedented. I don't feel he lost enough, which I think is concerning. But I think what Canadians were looking for at that moment was a wartime prime minister. They wanted a sense of security, so they picked Mark Carney. I get that. But I think what concerns me, and we saw this with the failure of the Democrats, we saw
mm,
this with the failure of the New Democratic Party at the moment, is when we're dealing with a threat as dark and uh, big as what Trump and fascism is, we tend to not want to sound hysterical.
mm,
And there was a Holocaust writer, Louis Fisher, who wrote about how democracy brought brought the Nazis to power because democracy kept saying, well, he can't be as bad as that, and democracy could contain him. And that democracy is based on people being reasonable when they were dealing with those who were being extremists. And I think we're in the same situation today. We saw this definitely, and we're seeing it now with the Democrats. They're not at the front lines as we are watching now. Trump, looking to threaten to use the military against unarmed civilians. Where is the opposition? Where is the opposition in the national media? Where is the opposition in the courts? So it's going to take in Canada, I think we have a bit of an advantage because we're seeing the nightmare playing out south of the border, but
mm.
we have to be pretty militant to remind our politicians that they have to hold the line, they have to stand for the rule of law, and they cannot cut side deals with a gangster.
Hmm. I want to focus on the NDP for a minute because I think looking at the last term of parliament, I think the party did a lot of good things and did a lot of right things. And I think one of them is, using the confidence and supply agreement to get stuff accomplished and holding the governing party to account. But which is, kind of what you're supposed to do. And what we always talk about, what we want governments to do is to be collaborative, work together, work across party lines. But it does kind of feel like the NDP got punished for that. And so I'm curious from if you could wear your politician's hat for a minute, how do you handle acting responsibly as a party, knowing that it kind of costs you electorally? Not to say that that is the only reason why the NDP lost seats in the last election, but I mean, it is definitely part of the conversation about your party now.
I think what's really important to put in perspective is the massive wins that the NDP achieved have been unprecedented. I mean, a national dental care program, when we brought the national dental care plan to Parliament, we got laughed out of Parliament by all the main parties. But at the doors, we promised people we will go and we'll fight that. You can't get the government to commit to national dental care and then say you're going to rip up the government's agreement 6 months later for the next budget because it takes 3 years to do that. So what we had to stop paying attention to, number one, were the conservative supporters who hated us, who said that we were sucked up to the liberals. They weren't
Hmm.
going to vote for us anyways, but
Hmm.
we became gun shy because we heard this, oh, you're sucking up to the liberals, you're sucking up to the liberals all the time. I think the national media, the Ottawa bubble, it's like high school drama time. So I think our leader I think he got thrown off by them because they're always like, well, when are you going to be tough? When are you going to stand up to him? So then he decided he had to be tough, which was not the moment to be seen as being tough.
Right.
Canadians saw Trump coming in. They wanted to know that we were ready to govern. I think it was very fair when Trudeau collapsed, when Christopher Freeland threw him under the bus, for us to have come out and said, listen, Trump's here. We are ready to fight for the Canadian people. If the Liberals can't do it, then we are not going to support them. But what we made a mistake at that moment was the party had gone all in on the leader identity. We had
Mm,
become Team Jug Meat, and so they went out to sell that when people suddenly were focused on Trump. So they missed the mark. I don't think the fact that we worked with the liberals and got dental care was the problem. I think we didn't sell it hard enough.
right.
We didn't say, listen, you sent us to do this. This is about being pragmatic. This is about holding government to account. And this is what we did. This is why we did it. We ended up going out and saying, hey, our leader's a fighter. The guy, I mean, God, there's that video that looked like a Rocky Balboa boxing video. And I mean, it was a disaster because that wasn't what people wanted at the time. They were worried about Trump. They weren't interested in the leader thing. So I think the New Democrats have to do a lot of soul searching about how things went off the rails that badly. But what we did accomplish was some of the, I think, the most powerful things the New Democrats have accomplished. And the thing I'm hearing from people on this tour, it's not an NDP tour, it's a resistance tour. But I'm really hearing from people they understand we can't go to a two-party system in Canada. This is what has destroyed democracy in the United States. You need that counterpoint of the New Democrats. So they're going to have to be a lot of hard conversations, but I'm pretty confident that the rebuilding will happen because of the people who are coming up to me who are very still idealistic and wanting to start over. So that's an important thing, but it's going to take time and it's going to be a
Right.
long road back.
It's going to take time, but I think this is sort of an issue that a lot of politicians at just about any level of government encounter that, in order to enact systemic changes, that takes a while, that takes a lot of negotiating and collaboration. People want immediate answers, though. People want to see the proverbial aircraft carrier turn 180 degrees quickly in the middle of the ocean, which isn't possible. How do you reconcile those two things? And as you're having these conversations with people like who are eager to tackle issues and make change, how do you temper that with the idea that, you're not going to get this done in 12 months or 24 months? This is a years long commitment.
Well, it's a really important question. It's one of the things that I feel that we've let democracy is being let down by us focusing on this, this polling culture where every night there's a new poll, even when there's no election. And so political, all the political parties and the political classes are obsessed with what the next poll results will be as opposed to what the big picture is. I think Canadians are looking for leadership that says, listen, this is not going to be easy. This is going to be a long, hard road, and this is how we're going to do it. I'd like to hear that from Prime Minister Mark Carney.
Mm,
To retool our economy doesn't mean we're going to be giving out a whole bunch of tax breaks and patting people on the back and glad handing. To retool our economy is going to take an enormous amount of money. In terms of defense, what are we going to do with the fact that we have now our neighbor is our biggest threat? Um,
mm,
where are we going to buy F-35s that are computer systems are controlled out of the US? I think it'd be better to have that conversation with Canadians. I think in the terms of the left have to really decide that it's about bringing forward government in the long term. So
mm,
yeah, we're going to compromise on some stuff, but it's also we got to rebuild. The left is out of touch with the working class. The left is out of touch with people who don't vote. That is something that we have to address. And once we start to address that, I think we can offer people things. But the one thing I've found from the response to Trump,
mm,
which has just totally invigorated me, where I've seen really exciting movement have been very ordinary people who tend not to be the political class. They're not the political thinkers. They know in their gut that what they're seeing is a rise of fascism. And they're saying, no, this was the power of the boycott, the power of ordinary people standing up. And it's not being talked about in the national media. And it would be real tragic if we lost this moment by not saying, hey, Canada did something extraordinary.
mm,
Canadians are being noticed around the world for standing up. It doesn't mean we should be patting ourselves on the back, but it means recognizing that we actually, when we face down against tyranny and the gangster, ordinary Canadians are like, not on my watch, no damn way. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to do something. And we could build on that momentum, I think, to move us towards a better country.
well, speaking of building momentum, and I think you kind of touched on this, having kind of a new media, if not an like a new approach to media. I mean, you have just talked about being reinvigorated. I think a lot of that is because you're in essence maybe the fourth Mycellus brother now, appearing
Yes.
on their YouTube channel. Um, but how much of this is sort of like a word of mouth effort and building like new media ecosystems in our country too, which is something the Mycellus brothers have been doing in the States.
Well, I think what's really fascinating is that, um, our national media haven't been there to answer these questions. You look at the famous Canadian pundits, in the National Post, it all sounds like the same five guys saying the same things that they always said. The rest, it's again focusing on the high school drama on the Rideau. Um, the My Silas brothers have really captured a fascinating market in Canada because they've been calling out Trump. And what really struck me when I started appearing on Midas Touch was the amount of just like really ordinary people, like bus drivers, personal support workers, retirees, farmers who watch that. So I'm thinking, okay, there's a whole market of ordinary Canadians who are getting their news elsewhere now because they're not seeing it reflected. I
Right.
started the resistance. I didn't even know what I was going to do. I just started to write. My Substack, I have to write every day. It's been almost uh, I think I've written 120 essays in just over 120 days. I'm writing every single day because people are saying we need a voice. We need someone to articulate this. I didn't think that my voice was all that unique, but what I saw was that there's a vacuum. People want to
Right.
know that there's an alternate vision. They want to know that there's a way of talking about fascism and tyranny and calling out what we are actually seeing that everybody knows that other people, the political class, the political thinkers, the media pundits are tiptoeing around. Ordinary people don't want us tiptoeing around it. That is what's been really a fascinating thing. And I mean, today, the amount of messages I've been getting from the United States, from California, writing to me, because they're seeing what we're doing with my team and the resistance.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Mysalis brothers are reaching into Canada. In some ways, I'm reaching into the States and into Europe because we're talking about the great threat of our era, which is the rise of fascism.
This gets to something there's a local group here that, your old friend Phil Alt runs, Breezy Breakfast, and I was listening to their conversation from last week. They were talking about resiliency and resistance, and there was some discussion about the local end of things. And I'm wondering just to get your thoughts on this too. A lot of people see the big national issues, the big national personalities and things, and perhaps feel stymied. Like, how can I get involved in that? I have no idea where to start. But people can act locally too. So, can you talk a bit about maybe the role of acting locally and how that can help these anti-fascist efforts and the efforts to create more democracy in the country?
That's a very profound question because what I've realized um, is that, again, coming out of COVID, coming out of being isolated, and we'd stopped meeting with each other. We'd stopped talking. We stopped talking with people outside of our little world. What we need to do is we need to get back to community meetings. We need to get involved because when people get involved, they get over their fear. Because I've met so many people. I remember one woman, it was one of my rallies, said she was so terrified. She was doom scrolling that she didn't know what to do. So she went and started knocking on her neighbors' doors who she'd never spoken to. And she couldn't believe that they felt the same thing as her. And so they ended up creating, a local chapter of doing resistance for anything. Local is where it starts because again, we're building these webs of resistance. I would like to tell you folks not to worry. I'd like to say, having been over at the NATO meetings, that our big brother Germany is going to be there to defend the rule of law and that France has got this. I didn't see that.
Mm,
I saw them looking as panicked and uncertain as my next door neighbors. There is no magic wand that's going to get us out of this, but what will get us through this right now is that importance of getting people involved, getting people out and active, making them feel like it matters. I've been involved in the formation of Grandmothers Against Genocide, and it's one of the wildest things I've ever seen. These sometimes they're 80 and 90-year-old women who've never done anything political, but feel that in the face of genocide, they've got to speak up, and they're just going out on street corners and standing there and holding vigils, and more people are coming. It may seem to someone cynical that means nothing. But what it does show is that if we're determined, the fascists aren't going to move. If Canada is strong, Trump is not going to come for us. But if we start breaking and if we start being frightened and we start getting pushed around, then you can be assured that this is going to get a lot worse than it is now. So right now, we're holding the line and we hold it from the ground up, from the local to the regional to the national to the international. And the amount of people that I've met around the world who now say to me, elbows up, we're going to be like Canadians. And I just got a message from California saying California will be stand strong like Canada. We might not realize that the rest of the world sees us as having stood up to Trump, but other
Right.
people see us. So it's a powerful thing, and we've got to find ways of building these. It can be done at the local level. What I'm trying to do is knit all these local actions into a larger, broader movement that then can speak across borders.
And I'd point out too, like movements build. Like if you go back to last summer, you couldn't use genocide in reference to what's going on in Gaza without
Absolutely,
getting
yeah.
attacked. But now people seem kind of more free to be able to use it. That you have grandmas against genocide.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we were tiptoeing around a lot of these issues before. The reason we're not is because we are in the age of the monsters.
Mm.
Netanyahu has no interest in abiding by the rule of law. Our leaders have failed. So we would have normally deferred to them. We would have normally deferred to Canada government, to France, to Germany. We'd have thought they'd fix this, and they didn't. So it falls to ordinary people. We would have thought that the Democrats, that the courts, even the U.S. military would stand up for the rule of law, and they haven't. So again, it's falling to ordinary people. We're in this moment where those that should be doing their job failed, and what ordinary people are seeing is the rise of a serious dark threat, unlike anything since the 1930s. Hell, Steve Bannon said, "Get ready for this year; it will be as exciting as the 1930s." Well, you know what? My idea of exciting in the 1930s and Steve Bannon's idea of exciting are two different things. So I'm thinking, what were the things that we had to do back then? And we stood up to fascism and we stood up to it in a big way. And we are a long line of fascist fighters, and Canada has to hold the line. That is what people want to talk about. People want to know how we can do it, and they want to see that picture framed very clearly.
Maybe to wrap up, then, not to give any spoilers or anything, but we talked before. Your event's already sold out here in Guelph. So as people are coming in and are leaving, what do you hope that they leave with in terms of, I don't know, a feeling, a direction? What is it you hope to leave Guelphites with as you're leaving town next week?
Well, the thing about Canadians is, we're a nation of likable slackers. We never had to actually come up with a national narrative, right? We didn't wave the flag. Well, let the Americans do that. But it's okay to be Canadian right now. We've done a lot of wrong things as a country. We know that. We like to squabble about, I think, sometimes the dumbest stuff, but that makes us Canadian. But when push comes to shove, we're going to stand up. And right now, we need everybody standing up because we're seeing what's happening right now south of the border. And we are determined as a nation that we're not going to let that happen here. So I'm encouraging people to come out, participate, get a sense of where they fit into this big picture of resistance. It's actually for all the fear and fright out there, I tell people stop doom scrolling. Do not doom
Mm.
scroll. It's not going to help you. It's not going to make the world a better place, but get involved, come out and realize we're actually doing something right now. And as long as we keep doing it, the other guys are not going to be able to make a move on us.
Well, Charlie Angus, we see you standing up and we see other people standing up with you, and we appreciate you standing up on open sources. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.